Today I want to talk about first lines. This is something that we writers tend to stress a lot about. Sometimes too much, in my opinion. Because I don't necessarily think that every book needs the perfect, shocking, captivating first line. Let's give readers some credit. They're probably going to read more than one line before they decide whether or not they're going to keep reading your book. I know I do. I know that I've read books that had amazing, intriguing first lines. I could tell that the author had spent a lot of time and effort on that. And then the rest of the book or the rest of the chapter didn't really live up to it. And I've read amazing books that I loved that had really average or even mediocre first lines. For example, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I really loved. We did this as book club and I think we were all big fans of it. It's a really popular book. It's done well. A lot of people like it. The first line of this book is just, "Can you come into my office?" I mean, when I was taking a creative writing class in college, that was actually a rule of writing we learned, is that most of the time you shouldn't start your story or your book with a line of dialogue, which this book does. Taylor Jenkins Reid breaks the rules from the very beginning. "Can you come into my office" is not really an intriguing line that makes you think, OMG, I have to keep reading this book. But the rest of the book is so good that it doesn't really matter, and you don't really remember whether the first line was good or not. I just happened to be looking through some of my favorite books and saw that one and was like, wow, that was the first line? All that being said, a strong first line can definitely be beneficial to your book. It can create interest in readers. It can get people talking about your book. It can set the tone or introduce the character or the world. So it definitely is important that you have a good first line. I just don't think you need to stress too much about having the perfect, most amazing first line in all of literature. If you're struggling to figure out that good, solid first line for your book, I do have a few simple tips, a couple of pitfalls to avoid, and some favorite examples to share with you. So let's get to that. My first tip is actually how I figure out most of my book's first lines, and that is to think about what first attracted you to this idea. Was it an interesting character, or a unique world, or a really tense conflict? Whatever it is, if it gets you excited enough to sit down and plot and write an entire book about it, chances are it'll probably get people excited to read it as well. For example, one of my favorite first lines is from The Sacred Lies of Minnow Bly by Stephanie Oakes. It is really short and simple. It's, "I am a blood-soaked girl." This line instantly pulled me into this character's story, and as you read, you learn more about kind of the dual meaning of this line and the violence that has been done against Minnow Bly and also the violence she has caused. It's a really evocative first line that is really important to that character. It also accomplishes my second tip, which is a good first line creates questions. So when I read "I'm a blood-soaked girl," I want to know who this girl is. I want to know what she's done, what has happened to her, why is she soaked in blood? Another great example of this is Rosamund Hodges' Cruel Beauty, one of my favorite books. It also has a very short and simple first line that causes a lot of questions in the reader. The first line of this book is, "I was raised to marry a monster." I instantly want to know more. I want to know more about this character. I want to know more about this monster. I want to know more about this world. What is going on in this book? I need to know. So think about what types of questions your readers are going to be thinking after they read that first line. Are they going to want to know more about this character or this world or this conflict? Tip number 3. Avoid backtracking. So I see this sometimes where a writer has come up with an intriguing first line, it piques your interest, and then immediately they have to, or they think they have to, go back in time to explain that first line and who the character is and why they're there. An example would be if the first line of your book was, "I think I've broken my leg." And then instead of explaining that as the character moves forward, you decide to immediately in the second paragraph jump back 2 hours and submit readers to a kind of boring scene that leads up to the broken leg. Of course, like all writing rules, this is not hard and fast. Rules are made to be broken in writing, and it can be done well, but a lot of times it isn't. As a reader, it can feel kind of disingenuous if you're really interested in that line and then the author immediately rips you away from it into something less interesting. And as a writer, it can negate the good you've done with that interesting first line if you then immediately bore bore the readers with something else. My fourth tip is to use your first line to establish tone and voice. Similar to the previous tip, you want that first line's tone and writing style to mesh with the rest of your book. If the first line doesn't fit with the rest of the book, it can be jarring and can give readers false assumptions about what kind of book they're reading, which you definitely don't want. I mean, "I'm a blood-soaked girl" is an amazing first line, but it's an amazing first line for Minnow Bly because it fits with her story. If it was followed by some light-hearted rom-com, I would be very confused and it wouldn't be as good of a line as it is in the book it's already in. This is particularly important if you're writing in first person because you want to establish your character's unique voice in that first line. An example of this is Noteworthy by Riley Redgate. I love the first line of this book. It is, "Monday morning was the worst possible time to have an existential crisis. I decided on a Monday morning while having an existential crisis." It sets up the main character's dry, sarcastic sense of humor from the very beginning. And my fifth and final tip is that if you are really struggling to come up with a single line or sentence that starts your book off perfectly, instead, focus on creating the perfect first paragraph. Because like I said, readers are probably going to read more than one sentence before they make a decision whether to keep reading or not, so you have a little extra time to convince them. My example for this is Bloodleaf by Crystal Smith. It has an interesting enough first line, but when you combine it with the second sentence that makes up the first paragraph, it's even better and it makes it even more intriguing. So the first paragraph of this book reads, "The gallows had been erected in the shadow of the clock tower, partly so that the spectators could witness the executions without the nuisance of sun in their eyes, and partly so that the tribunal could keep its killings on precise schedule. Order in all things, that was the tribunal's motto." This does everything that a first line is supposed to do. It creates a lot of questions for me. I want to know more about this tribunal and this world and who they are executing on a precise schedule, but it does it in a paragraph rather than one short line. I love short, impactful first sentences like "I was raised to marry a monster" or "I am a blood-soaked girl," but not every book needs to have the same kind of first line. That would get boring and they would become less impactful if they were all the same. So it's okay to spend a few extra words, a couple extra sentences to pull your readers in. Just remember, like I said at the beginning, it's okay to not have the perfect, most interesting first line that everyone's making their blog post lists about. Your book can still be successful. It can still be a great book that people love. After all, the first line of The Hunger Games, one of the best-selling YA books of all time, is just, "When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold." I mean, I guess it's sort of interesting because you want to know who's normally on the other side of the bed, I guess. But it's not like it's some blows my mind first line. And it's still a great book. That's it for today, nerds. Thank you for watching. If you want, share some of your favorite first lines, whether it's from someone else's book or from your own writing, down in the comments, or feel free to ask any questions. If you have any other writing questions, definitely join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for our live chat. We love interacting with you guys and talking to you every Sunday, so we hope to see you there.